you dream of a classroom where learning is natural? Can we inspire students to lifelong learning? What exactly is the purpose of an education? Inspiring students to be curious, independent, creative, innovative, deep thinking, confident, proactive, collaborative, determined, educated. Rise to the challenge of changing the world. This is teaching. This is learning. This is who we are. Welcome to the Tabletop Inventing Podcast.
How can your team grow up to work with their childhood hero? What is the path to finding a passionate and exciting career? What are some alternatives for intelligent teens who aren't thriving in an academic environment? Listen in today for wisdom on these questions from a lifelong entrepreneur.
As a parent, I care about my kids' character and I care about their innate abilities. I don't really care how good their grades are if I see growth in them, if I see excellence in them in certain areas.
This is the podcast where we discuss innovation, excellence, and entrepreneurship for teens and the adults who cheer for them. Today's guest is a personal development enthusiast. I won't tip my cards on the show just yet, but let me share a quote by one of my favorite physicists, Albert Einstein. All that is valuable in human society depends on the opportunity for development accorded the individual. Humans contain the most powerful innovations coming in the future. Every great product or human accomplishment began in the mind of a person. In fact, the seed of those ideas probably began in the mind of a teenager. Can parents and educators inspire teens to pursue those seeds of world change? I believe so strongly in those seeds of potential that we're starting a new project called the Resonance Innovation Fellowship, where teens can find the mentoring and support to discover their full potential. We have extensive experience working with teens and helping them accomplish unbelievable results. If you know a high school student willing to push themselves, explore themselves, and grow more than anyone they know, send me an email at stevecurdy@ttinvent.com and mention RIF, Resonance Innovation Fellowship. Kevin Miller grew up as an entrepreneur. In fact, from his earliest memories, he always thought of himself as an entrepreneur. Recently, his enthusiasm for personal development led him to work with the Zig Ziglar brand. And now he's the host of The Ziglar Show, one of the top 10 most popular business podcasts in the world. Listen in today to hear the exciting and gritty details of growing up as an innovator. So my guest today is Kevin Miller. Kevin is the host of The Ziglar Show, and I have to admit that Zig Ziglar is one of my heroes, and we'll have to ask Kevin the story about how he ended up the host there. He is the son of a good friend of mine, Dan Miller, and he's recently a partner on a medical company venture, which I think is interesting. We may have to ask him about that. But he says that his favorite role is that of dad. He is father to 7 kids, and he is just a man full of surprises. So Kevin, tell us a little bit about how you got onto the Ziglar Show.
Yeah, I grew up on Ziglar. I mean, my dad even, sounds kind of funny, but I went to motivational seminars with Ziglar and saw him there. And if I had an attitude problem, I'd sometimes get an attitude adjustment, which meant going and reading some Zig materials, which you'd think I was upset about. I'm grateful today. That was my major education right there, some of what I'm most grateful for. But I think it was through working with my dad that I met Tom Ziglar, who's been CEO, that's Tom's son, CEO of Ziglar for a long time. And I had the privilege of being a guest on the Ziglar Success 2.0 show a couple times years ago. But honestly, it was last summer. You know, Zig died 2.5 years ago, and I'm just a fan of theirs. And I had some concerns on what's going to happen with the brand. And was talking with Tom and had some ideas. And he said, "Hey, will you just help us?" And so they hired me as a marketing consultant. And one of the first things I saw was this podcast, which had huge numbers, but had been dormant for about 13 months. And yet it was still getting about 150,000 downloads per month.
Wow.
oh my gosh, guys, I've been doing podcasting for years, nothing like that numbers, but I said, let's pick this up. And that's it. About a year ago, I think literally last November, 2014, I just started doing it. And I said, instead of just playing Zig clips, let's play them and then talk about them and have guests on and talk about it and really get deeper. And that's what we've done. And that thing has just flat out gone through the roof. We're sold out with advertising, so we have to add shows, and it's become a big revenue generator. But then the anomaly really is the past couple weeks. And I saw we were at like number 12 in top business podcasts in the world today, which is amazing. But the past couple weeks we were sitting number 5 behind Dave Ramsey and Tim Ferriss, guys that are in their prime. And the fact that we're there with an icon that's passed away is unprecedented. I feel like it's probably the thing that I have pushed to make happen the very least of anything I've ever done. And it's one of the things that is succeeding better than anything I've ever done. So go figure that out.
Well, so does that happen a lot with entrepreneurs, that sometimes those things that you don't expect are the things that sneak up on you and do the best?
That's a great question. I have definitely seen that. I mean, sometimes we see the story and by blood, sweat, and tears, they made something happen. But no, honestly, I do see that happen. Or yes, I should say, I see that happen. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at my briefcase, which is a saddleback leather briefcase given to me by Dave Munson, who owns Saddleback Leather Company. I mean, that guy he would just tell you he was a hobo down in Mexico, and stumbled upon this cool bag and asked somebody where they got it. And they said, oh, down at a shop down here. And he went down there and said, hey, can you make one for me that looks like this? And then he thought, hey, people keep commenting on him. I'll put one up on eBay. And it was not smooth sailing, but that is what he has today in a multi-million-dollar business that he adores. And it wasn't something that he made a big plan to do. He just it was something that hit his passions and hit his skill set of design. And I don't know that those are the majority of the stories at all, but it is, even in my own journey, I think that sometimes the way that I saw it play out was not the way that it happened, and it was a different avenue that I achieved success through. Yeah.
So with that in mind, do you ever, as you're going through the different opportunities that come across your radar screen, do you ever look at one and say, that one's a real loser, or wow, that one's a real winner, and get it exactly backwards?
Being in the line of work that I am, in so much business development and being privy to so many initiatives, it used to give me anxiety, really, because I thought, man, I should be a part of that one, and I should be a part of that one, and what if I miss the boat? And I had to come back and really look at, okay, what is my heart? What is it that I want to do, that I feel is my niche and is my particular bent, if you would? And I've come to, in that, be, the past decade or so, be a lot more at peace with seeing different opportunities and realizing that, what, good or bad, I look at it and go, does that fit me or not? And so I haven't really looked at some and said, gosh, should I be involved? Is that going to be a loser deal? I guess I step back and be more at peace with where I am, and if I feel like I'm a good fit, which is a big part of the story of what I'm doing today with my major initiatives. They weren't things that if you'd asked me, well, heck, if you'd asked me a year ago or a year and a half ago, I didn't really even have either of them on my radar. And here I am. But I did have the vision of the direction I should go. I just did not foresee these particular vehicles.
That begs a question then, as an entrepreneur, is it that you're doggedly pursuing this business plan that you have written on the back of a napkin, or is it that you have a set of principles that you adhere to rigidly or very firmly, and when something comes across, you say, oh, that fits?
For me, the answer is that has been the pathway in that order in my own journey, to where I doggedly, with clenched fists, held on to those sets of principles and those visions in a particular platform. And it was when I let go of that particular vehicle, that particular business model, and backed off and said, okay, I do feel confident and secure in the direction and the principles and my skills and my abilities and what I feel called to encapsulate within whatever business I do, but I'm going to back off and knock on some doors onto what vehicle it should be, that I have found the most peace and success. So that's been hard for me. And I think that's probably indicative as you see, well, here, this has always been a soapbox, Steve, is that, when people talk about, oh, so-and-so is a serial entrepreneur. Now, are there some people that are great at business and they go from business to business and they're good business builders? I would say, no, they're not serial entrepreneurs. They're good business developers, and they apply themselves to different opportunities, but they stick with their core idea, core skill. But even with them, I generally see, they're serial entrepreneurs until they find something they really care about. And then they stop and they stick with it. I saw that with my dad. I can't say that I'm there yet. Now, again, I'm doing the same thing now I was doing 20 years ago. I just didn't realize it. But when you boil it down, I really am. Now, it is in a couple areas of interest that if I had to tell the future, if I had to make a bet, I'd say, you know what? I bet I'll be in these avenues to some aspect the rest of my life. Will it be this exact business that I'm in now? I don't know. And I'm able to devote myself 110% and yet hold on lightly. And Steve, that's new for me. That's admittedly new and part of my own journey and personal and vocational maturity.
So tell us a little bit about kind of where you have landed then, like your set of principles and what that looks like in what you're currently doing. Maybe flesh that out a little.
Well, I've always been drawn to communication. I love when I see a good message, whether that's in the form of a product or a service or an ideal or a belief or a value. When I see that, I want to maximize it. I hate it being hamstrung in any way. Kind of like the old Bible verse, don't keep your light under a bushel. I want to shine that sucker, whether it's my thing or somebody else's thing. And my wife says I'm a maximizer. I love to come along and maximize things, but I do that through communication. You could maximize something as through financial strength or forecasting and projections and marketing and branding. And there's 100 ways to mine's through communication, generally within marketing and with a branding focus. But really, when I come down to it, I want to look at the business development of something and see how can we maximize this. And again, I don't care if it's a product, a service, a church, a book, or whatever. So that's what I've always been drawn to. It's what I do best, but I've done it in different formats. And as you know, it was 7 years now, I think. Actually, it's been longer than that. It was through some work with my dad, Dan Miller of 48 Days to the Work You Love. Is a book he wrote, and he's got a big platform there. I was doing some work with him, and long story, but found that I loved helping people develop an idea, specifically, people that were looking towards self-employment. They were in traditional jobs, and I just had a lot of personal experiences where I ended up sitting across from the table, usually with guys who were just numb, depressed, demoralized because they were just doing the grind. Is this all it is? And I just found myself authentically kind of picking and pulling to find what did jazz them, what did make them excited. And I'd so often find something, and I just was incredulous, going, well, why don't you do that? Because that's how I was raised. That was the gift I was given. I said, why don't you do that? And they go, well, I never thought about it, or they point out the obstacles, and I just had a knack for helping them overcome those real and perceived obstacles. I turned that then into a business, Free Agent Academy, and it was focused on helping people pursue self-employment. I had some incredible success with that. There were multiple times where I let my idealism get in front of good business wisdom, and that's an Achilles heel that sounds good in intent, but you still have to be wise with business. And I did that, and so I saw really big highs and lows, but also realized that I had gotten, as much as I love personal development, that I had gotten almost totally into personal development and really out of any business development. And that's what I'm really good at. And you got to have both. I don't believe in one without the other. And I definitely am heavy on personal development. But it was through that ultimately I stepped back and said, you know what? I've gotten away from some of my true core abilities in business development. So I'm going to step back. I know what I'm good at, but I'm going to look at some opportunities. And that's when I contacted Tom Ziegler. And I wasn't really looking for anything, but I was just knocking on doors, just kind of trying to let go. That's always a point for me, is to realize when I'm holding on too tightly, let go. Knocked on the door there, and then one of my best friends has a medical practice with a very different view on medicine and health and wellness. And I can't even say I knocked on that one, but I just saw something he was getting involved in, and I just had an opinion. And I pushed my way in with it. And out of that came a big opportunity. And that's where both of those arenas are where the majority of my vocational investment is in today.
So the Ziegler brand, or at least my sort of keyhole view from the outside, having listened to quite a bit by Zig Ziglar, sounds like a personal development brand. Is that one of the things that drew you to knock on that door?
Well, absolutely. Again, I grew up around the motivational, inspirational world. So I was, as a kid, other kids' dads are taking them to sporting events. My dad was taking me to see Zig Ziglar and Dale Carnegie classes, and you name the speaker, I probably saw him. And he also got us involved at some of the really big events behind the stage or behind the counter, helping them sell their products. They would ask for volunteers and things. So I got to do that, which was initially it was really cool, but I honestly got burned a handful of times by seeing some of these bigger than life people behind the stage. And it was shocking to see their character, some of them. Zig, however, was always the real deal. And then when I got to go do a couple shows for Ziglar down at their headquarters, the first one I got to spend an entire day with Zig. And it was after he had had a bad fall and he was getting older. And so he had some, I don't even know if I want to say it was dementia, but he would repeat himself a lot, kind of got down to his core essence. And his core essence was absolutely beautiful. His family is beautiful, and that's who runs the business. And it was an incredible experience. So yeah, I was all in at that point with being fans of theirs. And it was me looking at that message and that icon and saying, I don't want that to go away. And my personal interest in that is what led to the opportunity. So now, yeah, I'm doing, really with both endeavors, I'm doing things that I believe in so much and enjoy so much. I would do them for free, but I do happily accept their good payment as well.
So a friend of mine that I just spoke with this last week is a trainer for the Ziglars and has had an opportunity to spend some time with Zig Ziglar. And it's interesting because he gave the same analysis you did. So evidently Zig Ziglar was living a very consistent life across all of his platforms, whether he was on stage or on camera or off camera. And it sounds like that's a big deal to you, and sounds like it's always been a big deal to you.
Huge. Yeah, being authentic. And again, I was so gifted by my upbringing, and I never understood the separation between business and personal from a lifestyle aspect or from a persona aspect. And, doing what I've always done, which is a lot of being on stage in essence, whether that's, podcast behind a microphone or literally on a stage or videos and whatever, and knowing that, not that this forced me to that, but just everybody see that. My parents are going to see it. My wife, my kids are going to see it. How can you not be the same person across the board? I've had so much of my life where my friends, those closest to me, we were also involved in business together. So the idea of separating it never made sense to me, especially when it came to vocationally, where so many people go into their place of work or business and kind of turn off their heart, turn off their cares, relationally and life-wise and personally. I never understood that, and I just couldn't handle it for a second. I had to be involved in something that I'm working at for my sustenance, embody everything I cared about personally. Otherwise, it just felt like life's too short, and I don't have the patience. So again, that's not a right or wrong. It's just my personal perspective, but those are the people that I went after to help along in that same vein.
Well, that sounds awfully familiar. Having spent plenty of time listening to your dad's podcast, I hear a lot of the same themes. So certainly a lot of his thinking came across in the parenting. So I'm actually curious, what's it like to grow up as the son of an entrepreneur who's out there trying to make things happen? What's that feel like?
Oh, the being a life of an entrepreneur, I would say I loved it. That doesn't mean he was perfect. He's still my dad. He's still a guy. I still had my issues with him, but I love it, Steve. It's one of the things I'm most grateful for today. I wrote a blog 2 or 3 years ago, I think, and it was, I need to remember this because I cite it a lot, but it was something along the lines of one of the best presents my parents gave me was, and it was like ... failure. And seeing my parents, my mom was often in a support role, but a lot of times she was involved in the business. But to see my dad go after different business initiatives that he really was fully invested in. I mean, he was inspired by them. They were in areas that he liked and in his skill set. I couldn't understand somebody going to work at something they didn't care about because I just never saw that. So that was a huge gift, one. And then the second gift, maybe even bigger, was seeing the highs and lows and seeing, one year business is great and we're literally driving Cadillacs. And the next year things taint because of a bad decision or whatever. And we're driving embarrassing jalopies, which for my dad, who's a car guy, was really embarrassing. And we drove some embarrassing stuff, man.
I can't
That
imagine your dad in an embarrassing car, by the way. I just
Not
can't.
today, but man, even today, and once in a while you'd be surprised. But he seeing that happen, so being fully involved on the business side, and then being open about the finances. And I remember start things as a kid where there was some bad stuff that happened. We're upside down financially, and being privy to that, but then seeing home life not erode, which is my mom's platform today, creating a haven of peace. She's got a new book coming out soon around that topic. That was her, that no matter what's going on, we are going to have peace and love and relationship in the home. And seeing that gave me faith on a silver platter to go out and try stuff. I never failure like, oh my gosh, I failed at that. I mean, obviously, I have regrets and some stuff that I did, stupid decisions, and some businesses that did not work out. But it was also easy to see those. Okay, that's not going to work. Let's go on to the next thing. And I didn't expect perfection out of myself because, again, the peers that I saw in the business world, they had all gone belly up. I mean, my dad was buddies with Dave Ramsey from the get-go. I babysat Dave Ramsey's kids after my wife and I did after his bankruptcy and at the beginning of financial peace. And so I just expected that, man, if you're going to really produce something, you're probably going to, have some pretty significant failures, but that's what gets you to the big time, to put it plainly. And I just didn't expect anything different. Man, I'm grateful for that. And so it's been a big part of my own journey as a father to make sure my kids are privy to the good, the bad, the strong, the weak. And with me that, man, I'm just a guy, I'm going for it, but I'm sorry that we're not going to be eating out this year, and they've seen the highs and the lows where we're pinching pennies and then where we're doing very well. And I'm grateful for that. So grateful.
I was just thinking about that. As you grew up, was there a time in all of this influence where you realized that you had to work for yourself to be an entrepreneur? Or did it just never occur to you not to do anything else?
It really didn't occur to me to do anything else. But some of that was my bent as well. So yeah, one, it was what was exemplified to me was I never ever knew one day of my dad working for somebody else. I never experienced it. And he's got his own authority problems that maybe he passed on to me or I came by naturally. I could tell you. I'm definitely for better and absolutely for worse. I tend to do my own thing. And that's great for creating new things. It's hard in other areas of life and relationships, for sure. I wasn't a good kid in school. I didn't like the system and I balked at it. And my parents supported me in that because on the other side, I was running my own business. I was succeeding incredibly well in athletics and sports. And they saw success from me in other areas, so they didn't push that. I never contemplated it, and I actually did end up through again just kind of some incredible circumstances. I had a real job for 2 years. It was probably the best that an employment situation could possibly be. I had carte blanche. is we have to just pick the lesser of so many evils.
So I'm going to jump the gun on a question I normally ask because you brought it up. I'm curious about your perspective here. So you mentioned that your son looks stuff up online and that he kind of educates himself that way. We have so many digital tools at our fingertips now.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be educated now in this environment, in this society?
We obviously all have to have basic knowledge, to survive and live. And I'd like to think that that's where the school system first started out as, let's give kids a good rounded knowledge of all these areas, but they go way beyond that, of course. I mean, and education, as you put it that way, I mean, to get educated is one thing, but when we say what is an education, we say that like it's a noun and cite it as an asset. Hey, did you get an education? You've got to get an education. But I mean, its purpose of education is to enable and equip us to for me, my perspective. So if you're asking me, I would say, to my kids, it's to enable and equip them to uniquely walk out their purpose, their unique specific purpose. So, if I'm going to have them get an education, I want it to be in a specific training and teaching for a personally relevant pursuit. That's going to be different for every one of my kids. I don't have time or the need for some broad-based education just to have knowledge. So yeah, when you talk about, we have so much knowledge available, and I've tried to look this up. Someday somebody's going to lead me to it. There was some big name, Benjamin Franklin, Abraham Lincoln, it was somebody. And I hate that I don't know the details of the story, but somebody long ago, one of our forefathers who was publicly accused of being stupid. And he came back and it was based on something he didn't know. He says, why would I just try to have this knowledge stored in my head when it's at the fingertips of a book, an encyclopedia, a dictionary? If you want to know the answer to that, I'll look it up. I'm really good. I'm smart enough to look it up and find it. I don't need to lodge that in my brain. I'm going to have my brain be focused on intuition and figuring things out and strength and that nature, not just filled with knowledge that I can get anywhere. Well, man, I think we're at the height of that now. And I find myself looking to retain less and less knowledge because I just don't need to. It's on my smartphone. And I think some people look at that and think, well, gosh, that's not good. You know what? Maybe not, but it's there. I'm going to give my effort and my brain power to learning to deduct things, to be insightful, to be intuitive, to be discerning, and those things that you can't put a price on and you can't just open a book and find those out. Those are inherent abilities within me. That's what I want my kids to be dramatically strong in. And it's exactly what we're seeing the problem with today, where education is so focused on knowledge, and then kids get into the workplace, and we have corporations right now that are reeling under that and saying, we do not have kids. And intuitive is the main word that they use. We don't have kids. They know how to follow ABC step. That's what they were trained to do. But man, if things don't go according to plan, we need people who can figure things out. And it makes me think of, you'll appreciate this, Steve, talking about entrepreneurs, that they did a study somewhere and they looked at guys that are in just the regular enlisted military are not generally great entrepreneurs because they just are taught to follow the rules and do exactly as you're told. However, special forces guys are statistically, they end up going into entrepreneurial endeavors because they are taught to, okay, here's what we want you to do, but ultimately we just want the outcome. So however the heck you do it, we just want the outcome. And that's what entrepreneurialism is.
It's funny you mentioned that because I actually know a couple of special forces guys that have started businesses. I don't have any statistics on it. I just happen to know a couple of them.
I do too. I just went to a grand opening of a new brewery down in Colorado Springs, and it's a guy who I think he's younger than I am, but he just retired as a Green Beret, and he's going after business now.
All right, so you opened up a can of worms that I am going to try not to open too far because we're running a little short on time. But you mentioned something that itched something in the back of my brain. And normally I ask the question about education from the perspective of going out, finding information, and using that to make us better. But in today's environment, is it possible that a piece of education is then taking that knowledge, remixing it, and sharing it back?
I think so. I mean, it's kind of, what is that? Solomon said, "There's nothing new under the sun. It's all vanity." And I think, to some degree, that sounds depressing, but there is. But my gosh, we need things packaged differently. As time. I mean, look at Ziegler. I mean, the great truths. Do those ever change? No, but even with what he delivers, I think today we take it and we break it down in his great messages were, some of them are decades old and they are absolutely 100% true, but we need them delivered in a different way, or we need to understand how those truths function in a very different economy and with different portals like the internet and the information age. Again, gosh, no different than the Bible. And why do we still need people talking about it? It's still there. Can't anybody go read it? Well, yeah, but we need people to help us know how to apply it to today's life, because we're no longer living in tents, walking around barefoot with long beards. It's a different world. Principles are the same. But so I think if I understood your question, right, yeah, I think we're taking these things and packaging them up, speaking them even in our own voice. I see people and you think, why would we ever need anyone ever again to talk about financial health? Because we have Dave Ramsey. Well, yeah, we needed guys before him, and we need guys and girls after him who have their own voice, speak and reach people in their own way. And so in that way, I think nothing's saturated. There's always opportunity in everything. There's always opportunity in a different, better, more relevant or specific package.
All right, so I've got one last question after this, but short yes or no answer to this. Well, okay, this isn't a short yes or no answer, but I'll ask it anyway.
All right.
Have you found that you learn more by going out and finding the information and drawing it in, or by trying to repackage the information in an intelligent way and putting it back out?
Wow, Steve, I'm thinking about that. I spend a lot of time looking at information that speaks to me. And in some ways you could almost, I could see something, read an article, read a blog, read a book, whatever, and go, oh, that's it. But then it always comes through my own personal filter that I don't even know if it's add to, I just want to apply in a different context. And I have found that is so valuable. Honestly speaking to, Zig, I remember my dad one time back when I was doing business with him, and he wanted to do a teleseminar on goals. And I thought, well, geez, why don't we just tell him to read Zig? He's kind of done that. And yet we did it. And I realized, people have a finite amount of information or influence they allow in their life. And for those who had decided that Dan Miller, in this case, was one of their finite few places, they needed to hear it from him. They trusted him. And that really opened my eyes and that's why you get somebody who has a specific platform, but once they gain people's trust, they can speak on anything. So with that trust being so relevant, we need to take those truths and put them in our own words and from our own perspective and speak them to those who trust us, because they may not have exposure to them in any other way. So I think I go out, I look at stuff, I take it in, I experience it, and I speak it in my own voice and realize how relevant that is, which again, back to the Ziglar show, here I am just commenting, and to some aspect I could say, who am I to comment on Zig's stuff? But I literally take some stuff and go, you know what, I see that a little differently, or I would add this to it. And people really appreciate that. And I don't know that it means that they think that I have some great wisdom, but it helps them to take it maybe and think of it, embrace it in their own sense with an openness that they don't have to take it 100%. Let's take it and massage it and embrace it in a way that we are able to, so that we can digest it and it has relevance and takes root in us and we take action on it.
Well, I can definitely tell that this is a whole podcast series. So I think we'll come down to the last question, even though I'm dying to ask about a dozen more. And you've already touched on this in a variety of ways, but maybe you could tie it up with a neat little bow here. What is the purpose of an education with all these experiences you shared? What do you feel like that is? What is the purpose of an education?
I ultimately think that anything educationally is something that will enable and equip us to walk out our personal calling, to walk out as my buddy Gary Barkalow, who wrote the book It's Your Call, would be to walk out the desires in your heart, the God-given desires, not the I have a desire to eat a pint of ice cream desires, but the one of, man, I care about this. No matter what, I care about this. I care about this for people. I want to impart this to somebody. That personal calling, I'm careful with the word passion because it's got so much baggage on it these days. Because passion, I don't mean by what's just fun to you, but what do you have a fire burning in you for? I want an education that helps in that and in the things that matter. I mean, is there anybody that does not need education if they're going to be married, and how to be married well, and how to do marriage, and how to do relationship,
I think I need more of that, actually.
I do too, but nobody, you just get married and you're just supposed to wing it and intuitively know how. Well, that's humanity, but it's forgive the word, it's retarded. It's a tragedy. Same thing with parenting, that we have a kid and that we aren't taken through. Man, we need education that with our, with finances that we have, the things that we have to deal with in real life, we need wise education. But then in our personal callings, my wife right now is doing some work in child research that she is on fire about, and she's getting educated in. I have no bone in my body that has I appreciate what she's doing, but it's nothing part of my calling, except for, my union with her and supporting of her. And same thing with mine. What I go after is so unique to me. So do I need to shore up my education and what she's doing because I'm ignorant? No, man, that's not my calling. I'm secure in what my calling is. That's what my education should go towards. And so when people get an education or go to get educated, great. Find it in the place that's most relevant for what you want to do. And right now, one of my buddies, his son is pursuing welding, and this guy is highly educated, has a big paying job, and his son's going after welding. And I could see people seeing that and going, well, gosh, that's a step down. Thinking, no, man, this kid loves it. This kid loves it. He'll probably end up being the millionaire next door with a welding company who makes $1 million and nobody knows it, but he's going after something he cares about. And go get educated in welding. God love him, especially because he's making a plow for my Jeep right now. I think that's a high level education. Going out and just learning stuff to learn stuff sake or to get a piece of paper is tragic to me.
Well, Kevin, I think that we have about 5 more podcasts in us here, but we need to wrap it up.
I'd be honored, Steve. Thank you. I love questions. Thank you.
What's the best way for our audience to reach out to you if they have questions?
I have a page at Agent K Miller that's actually just a subpage of my Free Agent Academy site, but that kind of gives the places where I'm plugged in right now, like the Ziglar Show. And so Agent K Miller, and people can contact me at kevin@agentkmiller.com if they would like to. But it gives a little bit of what I'm doing. I mean, most people are finding me today through the Ziglar Show because the platform has gone through the roof. But that's where folks can get a hold of me personally.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. This has been fun.
Thank you, Steve. I'm honored and appreciate the questions, and love that you're living out these same principles. It's an honor. Thank you.
Did you enjoy our discussion with Kevin? He is just so fired up about helping people find meaning and purpose in their careers. And if you know an on-fire teen interested in discovering their true potential, send me an email at stevecurdy@ttinvent.com and mention RIF, the Resonance Innovation Fellowship. We're planning exciting innovations for teens in 2016. And be sure to subscribe to the TTI podcast so you don't miss great upcoming episodes. Also, to find out more about inventor camps, after-school programs, training opportunities, and more for techie high school students, visit inventingzone.com. Don't worry about the future. Sign up and we'll help you create it.